Sussex County Community College in Newton, New Jersey, a campus dedicated to academic, athletic, and service opportunities for all. As we look beneath the surface of this beautiful campus, there are many historical gems spread throughout, whether it be in the buildings, monuments, or preserved art. In particular, we recognize the eye-catching masterpiece known as the Horton Mansion, which resides here on the campus. There's more to learn on this segment of Capturing Sussex County, the Horton Mansion.
We're standing in front of the Horton Mansion, which is on the County Community College property. This mansion is historically and architecturally significant, and I'll be talking to you today about that. In terms of the history of the site, the first known settler in the town of Newton, Henry Hairlocker, established his house and a tavern down on the county road, which was then known as the Milford Road. And that was there for a number of years, and he had about 180 to 200 acres of land that constituted his farm. That farm was then sold in the 1830s to a gentleman named John Pettit. Pettit continued to own the property and farm it with its 200 acres until 1855, when he in turn sold that acreage and his house to John Horton. Horton at that time was very well known in the community and came to Newton at the age of 13 in 1820 to apprentice to a gentleman named John Rohrbach. Rohrbach was a manufacturer of saddles and all the equipment that's needed for horse-pulled wagons. And what he did is he learned his trade, and within 12 years, by 1832, Horton was able to buy Rohrbach out of his business and owned and operated it then for many years. Horton then sold the business and relocated to Newark with his family. There he developed his saddlery trade again and became one of 16 major manufacturers of these leather products. From there he moved on from different partnerships to temporarily being located down in New Orleans, where he was able to bring in cattle from the surrounding area and again had a tanning facility and made saddles and tracery for the horse-drawn vehicles. He then relocated back up to Newark, but by that point in the early 1850s, he was having problems with his health. And being more than almost 20 years away from Newton, he decided to relocate here as his final place of retirement. As you can see from the building itself, it has really high-quality workmanship. Its cut limestone walls were made here in this county, but that the trim work around the windows, the base of the windows, around the base of the building, are all cut brownstone. This stone had to be cut from somewhere else because we don't quarry that in this county. Horton himself, unfortunately, died of tuberculosis approximately 6 months before the building was done. He, his wife, and his children and his son's family lived here until 1921. They in turn sold it to 3 members of the Galante family who farmed the property. Much like Horton, they had a number of outbuildings here for the farm. They had, where we're standing in the parking lot, different fruit orchards. There were farm fields that were opened with corn and other products. And this farm was a very active one. They sold cattle, they sold milk cows, they sold all sorts of produce and products off the farm. So this continued on until the 1930s, when the Galante family sold the property to the Salesian. The Salesian order is also the same group that constructed the building that you see over on our right, and that was a academic building, and they developed the entire site for their college facility. The building in back of me, the mansion, was also renovated extensively, where they had music rooms, they had a small chapel in there, they had administrative offices, and they also had accommodations for some of the students in the 3rd floor. So when you're looking at this building, it's gone through a number of uses over its lifetime. What we're looking at here is something that is architecturally a significant building. It's the most reflective building of the Gothic Revival style that we have in Sussex County. In a house like this, the functions of the house would have been broken up into multiple levels. The basement would have been where the kitchen and supplies were kept. The first floor were for all the social activities, your front and back parlor, your greeting room, and other rooms that are associated with day-to-day life The second floor was for the bedrooms for the family that lived here. The third floor, or the attic, is where the servants would have been. So each floor had its own different function. There was a grand staircase in the main hallway, but that has subsequently been removed, but when the Salesians owned it. They maintained the servants' staircase in the back, which serves as a point of access for all levels in the building. If you look at the main entrance of the mansion, some of the things that are very typical of Gothic Revival is this recessed area of the front doors, the fact that they are paired doors and not just a single door. There is a transom above, and it's a pointed transom that reflects the point in the arch of the Gothic Revival entrance. You have over here, above it, the hood, cut from brownstone or sandstone, that's beveled all the way across. You can see the marks vertically on that for where the saw cut it. And that was brought in by train to Newton and then transported up here for the construction. The ornate work in terms of the molding around the perimeters of the door are also typical Gothic Revival. The same thing now can be said about the windows. If you look over there, you'll see paired windows, and what's interesting is as the windows have the barrel vault arch above them, there is in the flat area between the two windows a trefoil, three-pointed leaf design. Again, that was very typical of the Gothic Revival. And the Salesian order is the one that put this leaded glass windows and doors in place, and this was part of their chapel. The porch, unfortunately, like any other porch on an old house, is heavily weathered. The woodwork that you see here on the deck, the railing, even the columns, is not new to the building. Rather, it's been replaced many times because it's weathered and then rots out and has to be replaced and then repainted. One other feature that we should address, and that's the floor-to-ceiling windows on the first floor. Typical of a major mansion, as you can see here, we have two windows which are actually doors. Those are the same on the front and on the opposite side of the house. It comes up to a stile across here that breaks, and then you have a transom on the top. Again, it's a peaked window with a hood cut out of brownstone to fit the design of the Gothic Revival. This allowed people to actually open the windows and actually doors and walk in and out of the building on the main level onto the porch, which was quite typical of the Gothic Revival. This door that we're looking at here is on the left side of the front of the building, and this is where the wraparound porch ends. This is a single door in terms of width. It has a small one-pane transom above it. Again, the arched top. Recessed areas are fitted out with panels. This is an original door to the building, and because it wasn't the grand entrance where you had the twin doors, rather here you had a secondary entrance, and that's why you have only a single door. Again, it was very common in the Victorian style of architecture to see this sort of an arrangement in terms of placing emphasis on the main entrance as versus a secondary entrance here. We've spoken before about the outside of the Horton mansion and the architecture, which is Gothic Revival. We've talked about the different things that were done in terms of its design and construction. Now what we're going to do is go inside the building and take a look at the first floor and talk about the different architectural features that we'll see there. So just follow me. Coming through the building, this is a center hall layout, which means that you have rooms on both sides of the hallway. Normally when you come through these double doors, the first thing that you would have been greeted with was a massive staircase that would have led from the first to the second floor. And as you can see, that's missing. In September of 1928, the Salesians acquired the property, including almost 200 acres of land, as well as all the farm buildings. And at that point, they came in and they started renovating the Horton mansion. Normally, when you come through the doors, you would be greeted with a very grand staircase and a lot of architectural appointments and features very typically found in the Gothic Revival style. As you can see, there is no grand staircase. Apparently, the Salesians, when they did come here and they renovated it, a lot of the renovation work started in this hallway with the elimination of the staircase and the inclusion of a lot of very, very ornate plaster moldings. Some of the features that you'll see here, starting off with the egg and darts design, followed by the oak leaf design, these were made in sections using plaster molds that would be about a foot to a foot and a half long. The manufacturer would then have these molds filled with plaster, let it sit up, pop it out, and then they would be applied to the wall using a wet plaster slurry to glue it up. The same thing for all the other ornamentation that you see here. It was all made in sections. The large medallion in the middle where the women's faces are, that also was made in sections and then pieced together on the ceiling. It was to provide a high level of ornamentation with the least amount of work. When the Salesians redid this entire hallway, the same egg and dart molding was seen and found in the room to our right-hand side, which was their chapel. What is interesting is to note that the egg and dart motif was not replicated in any other room on the first or the upper floors. Apparently they considered the entranceway and the chapel to be the two primary areas for public occupancy and to try to impress people with the design. The front and back parlor also have medallions, but not as ornamented as this. Again, because it is of lesser importance to them in terms of the public presentation. The first room on the first floor that we're going to take a look at will be the chapel. Come join me. Okay, now we're in the chapel, which is located on the first floor right side of the building. Let me walk you around the building and the room and show you simple features of the building that were installed by the Salesians. Here, these two windows, these pairs of windows, lead out onto the front porch, and that window over there leads to the side. However, they're not actually windows, but rather doors that would open up and allow people to walk directly from the room out onto the front and side porch. This was a change from what was originally here, which would have been double hung windows with the full height of the window opening. Directly across the hall from the chapel we'll be going into now is going to be the front parlor. Why don't you join me? Right now we're standing in the front parlor of the mansion. Just as in the room across the hall, you'll see over here that the windows have been converted over into doors that lead outside. Now these were later conversions. These were not original to the house. You would have again had floor-to-ceiling windows in here. What we see here is a white marble fireplace, face and mantel. Very ornamented and also very typical of the Gothic Revival style. What you'll also see here is a cast steel fireplace insert. Fireplaces were used to heat the building throughout each one of the rooms. During the renovation work in the chapel, the fireplace had been removed for whatever reason, whether it was to give them more room, but that would have been part of a major renovation project. Here we see the fireplace in this area, and the other rooms upstairs are all intact and still connected to the same chimney stack going out. There is a fireplace in the basement also, where the original kitchen was under here. And so all of this heat would have been taken out, all the exhaust, through one common chimney with multiple flues. Now, obviously, the chandelier is a 1930s or 40s replica of something of an earlier period, but was inappropriate for the house. But the medallion up there, the center part of it, would have been made first, installed, and then the outer ring, which is incredibly ornate, with shells and other ornamentation, would have been made in at least 5 or 6 sections and glued in as one piece. The other thing that I wanted to point out was the fact that between the front parlor and the back parlor, the connector was these massive double doors. Right now we're standing in the back of the main entrance hallway, and you see this very large door opening that leads to the rear section of the house. What's interesting here is that this doorway at one time had double doors. The areas where the hinges were let into the framework have now been filled in and revarnished. But what's also interesting here is the thickness of this wall, which is almost 2 feet in thickness. And what this represents is the fact that this is the back stone wall of the main body of the house. In order to help carry the weight of the roof, which would have come down on this part, you could not have had a thin wall like we have in the interior partitions, but rather you had to have a full masonry wall in order to carry the weight of not only the second floor and the attic area, but then the roof structure itself. To help back this section up, what we see in back of us here is the rear wing of the house. So if you want to look at it as this way, that this is the break point between the formal family living area and the more informal area where the servants and help worked. Just as in the TV show Upstairs, Downstairs and Downton Abbey, this house also had a back stairway that the servants used to get access to the first and second and third floors. You notice here that it's a very narrow stair, it's a very winding stair, and a very steep stair. And it's really hazardous in terms of having to take things up and down and carrying things as you're traversing the stairs. The newel posts that we see here and the balusters, like this one, with its fluting and its turnings, are all very typical of the Gothic Revival architecture that this house represents. And therefore, this staircase and the newel post and the hand railing system are all original to the house. You also notice that there's a chair rail that runs up along there, so that as heavy and bulky things were being brought up and down the stairway, instead of the big stairway that used to be there, it didn't bang into the plaster and damage the plaster walls. So this staircase that we see here is original to the house. You'll notice also up there, there's a Gothic Revival or peaked window that was here originally. It's a fixed window and it doesn't slide up and down, but the stair cuts across in front of it because that was just simply a practical necessity in terms of the design. Access to the basement is through this door, leading down to a set of stairs, 5 risers, to a platform landing, and then down under these stairs and into the rooms below, where the kitchen was originally and storage of a lot of the private materials for the home as well as the workers here. We'll take a look also then and talk about the rest of the building. This hallway leads into the back office area for the Salesians as well as some of the dormitory rooms for the teachers who were here. This first area was a corresponding hallway that leads into the side solarium and had storage in there with the different built-in storage as well as closets. The 2 doors further down on the left led into the old kitchen, which was later converted into an office and dormitory for a teacher. There are 2 more rooms on this side, halfway down and further down. Again, they were dormitories for the faculty, and this was the washroom and lavatory for the people living on this floor. The bathroom facilities for the students who were living upstairs would have been up there in their dormitory area. Now again, there would also have been a door here that was swung in this side and provided some sort of privacy for the faculty that were here and also for bringing the food out from the kitchen when it was functioning. The kitchen was originally, as I mentioned before, down in the basement, but then got moved upstairs for practical purposes. I want to thank you very much for joining us in this tour of the Horton Mansion. This building is a reflection of the sort of industrial development that we had in our county back in the mid-19th century. The house is representative of an upper-class family who had done very well in the leather business. And we've been very fortunate to have it standing here today, 170 years later. So when you're on the campus of the County College in the future, stop by, take a look at it, and you can begin to appreciate what went into building this house and the architectural history of it. I'm Wayne McCabe. I'm president of the Sussex County Historical Society, and I want to thank you very much for joining us today.